Thank you so much. And our final speaker before we have some time for Q&A and then move seamlessly into the closing ceremony will be speaking about harnessing the power of social norms, culture, and religion to uphold sexual and reproductive health and rights. Dr. Natalia Kanem is UNFPA Headquarter Executive Director.
My dear sisters and brothers, the delegates to this 9th Asia-Pacific Conference on Reproductive and Sexual Health and Rights, representatives of the host government, Vietnam, whom I thank and we all thank for your warmth and your hospitality. Fellow panelists, thank you. Activists and people of courage and perseverance, anyone who's different and proud of it, and the dynamic young people here present, I am delighted to be here with you at this closing action of our conference, standing here as the new Executive Director of the United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, a responsibility that I'm really honored to take up. And I assume it following the untimely loss of Dr. Babatunde Oshotimehin earlier this year. Thank you, Leah, for the acknowledgement of Dr. Babatunde at the opening of this conference. He was a passionate advocate for the issues that we've been discussing here over the past several days. And it's a wide umbrella of sexual and reproductive health and rights, as we've just heard, which covers issues that lie at the nexus of social norms, of culture, of religion, of law, of justice, of equity, not only in the delivery, but also in the receipt of these sexual and reproductive health care services. So to advance justice and equity in sexual and reproductive health is part and parcel of changing legal, cultural, and religious barriers. And much of this you've been discussing at this very important conference. I would like to say that there is an atmosphere of newness. Where there is reaction, there's also positive action. For the United Nations, this is a new year with new leadership. Our Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, just in one example, has committed himself and the United Nations to an end to impunity for sexual exploitation and abuse, and also to full gender parity in the halls of the United Nations. So what I would like to talk to you about is advancing justice and equity in sexual and reproductive health and rights from our perspective in UNFPA and what I call future casting. What kind of future is it that we're creating for Asia and the Pacific, and indeed for the world? And we pose this question at a critical time. The answer to that sweeping question, what kind of future, lies in great part in how we care for the girls of today. In particular, the more than 325 million girls who are aged 10 to 19 across this beautiful region, Asia Pacific. This region and the world embarked on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It's underpinned by the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and we've said that we seek a life of dignity for all, to truly leave no one behind. And at UNFPA, we're embarking on our new strategic plan next year. We will fulfill 3 transformational zero goals in this region and elsewhere. 0 preventable maternal death, and everything that underlies a death, because for every death, there are hundreds of injuries and misfortunes. Second, 0 unmet need for family planning. And again, the question of agency, of rights, of autonomy is something that we're discussing, not only in these halls, but in communities across this country, across the region, and rightfully across the world. So 0 unmet need for family planning, and 0 gender-based violence and harmful practices, which is the reason that I am in Orange today, because like you, these 16 days of activism against gender-based violence and the movement that the hashtag #MeToo represents across the world is that we have to raise our voices and object when a girl or a woman, a man, anyone is subjected to violence. But the epidemic of violence against women and girls shows no sign of subsiding, and quite the contrary. So we base all of our work on a platform of population data, development, and evidence. And the 3 goals that I mentioned, which were formed in concert with many of you as stakeholders in the program of action that emerged from the 1994 International Conference on Population and Development in Cairo, which I was privileged to attend, as some of you also were. It continues to guide our work because it puts women's rights and human rights at the center. And the aim is to shift policy from paper into communities and action into women's lives. That's why it remains relevant now, and it will continue to be relevant more than ever. You know, it's said that the moon moves slowly, but it covers the town. So my anxiety is, can that slowness please be accelerated so that what we achieve gets done more quickly? To get to 0 maternal deaths. In the past 50 years, there really has been progress, and the number of women who die from complications of pregnancy or childbirth has fallen nearly by half. Still, today, with all the advances in medical technology, more than 300,000 women die globally each year from maternal mortality-related causes, and that means over 200 a day right here in the Asia-Pacific region. Tragic and preventable. Skilled birth attendants with backup emergency obstetric care is really crucial. And we applaud Vietnam as a shining example. You reached the MDG 5 on maternal mortality ahead of time. But even before pregnancy and childbirth, every woman and girl should fully enjoy her right to freely decide when, whether, and how far apart she wishes to space children that she wants to bear. Planning and spacing, still key to reducing maternal deaths. The second transformative goal is on 0 unmet need for family planning, because there's still 214 million women who want to delay their childbearing. And why should they lack access to quality services and supplies, including modern contraception? Among them are 6.3 million sexually active adolescent girls in Asia and the Pacific region. Without the expression of their rights and without quality services for these precious girls, we will continue to have the estimated 3.6 million unsafe abortions among young women in this region every year. And we will see millions of new cases of sexually transmitted infection, and these combined epidemics and calamities have a profound impact on the health and lives of the women and girls, of children, of adults. We have fetal and neonatal death, cervical and other cancers, infertility, HIV risk, physical, psychological, and social consequences that can severely compromise the quality of life of those who are affected. And while economic factors are indeed a major contributor to sexual and reproductive health inequity, so too are these norms, the patriarchal and social norms that are often wrapped up in the guise of culture. Culture is not static. Culture changes every moment of every day. And so should the taboos about discussing sexuality. Thank you, Michael Tan. So meeting the diverse SRH needs of men and adolescent boys also has to be something that we attend to. These are the partners of the girls and women. They're partners of each other. And not leaving them behind is an effective way to promote sexual and reproductive health and rights for all. Thank you. For the goal number 3, which is zero violence and harmful practices against women and girls, I only have one slide, so I'll refer to it once it comes up. The zero violence and harmful practices against women and girls is urgent and quite of the moment. Today, for example, the UN Foundation has published my opinion piece on the movement that's being labeled #MeToo. And first, I just want to say a word about sex ratio at birth, the topic of a very exciting session at this conference. Globally, on average, 105 boys will be born for every 100 girls. And the survival rate for the male infant is slightly less than that for the female infant. So 105 to 100 is the natural sex ratio, male to female, at birth. However, as a side effect of this technology that can identify the gender of the fetus, as we know, there is a growing gender bias sex selection in some countries. In some places, the ratio now stands at over 120 boys to 100 girls. And I've heard as high as 128 in places in this region, leading to the fact that there are more than 117 million missing women, a lot of them in China and India, other places as well. And this is a manifestation of persistent gender discrimination and son preference. Another example would be the violence that is child marriage and adolescent pregnancy, some of which is coerced. This jeopardizes a girl's chance of achieving her potential. And in developing countries, including in our region here, 1 in 3 girls is married before the age of 18. 1 in 9 is married under the age of 15. Some 5.4 million adolescent pregnancies occur every year, threatening the health and well-being of girls and of their children and truncating their life chances. Sexually active, unmarried adolescents and young people also have rights, and they should have the information and means to avoid pregnancy and unsafe abortion as they demand. And lastly, I just want to say that the ugly issue of gender-based violence, an estimated 1 in 3 women experiencing some form of violence in her lifetime, and in some parts of our region, the prevalence is even higher, linked again to patriarchal attitudes and norms that used to be perpetuated generation after generation. But the young people of today, 1.8 billion strong, whom I call the SDG generation, have a good chance of putting a stop to some of this. Survivors of such violence can and do suffer sexual and reproductive health consequences: the forced and unwanted pregnancy, the unsafe abortion, the traumatic fistula, and infection, including HIV. In Timor-Leste, almost 1/4 of all teenage girls pregnant and having a baby by the time they're 20 years old. And 20% of them are married by the time they're 18. So even though premarital sex is supposedly forbidden, the evidence, the facts staring us in the face is that most teen pregnancies there occur before marriage. And one of our empowerment workshops for teen mothers in Timor-Leste, which UNFPA fields in concert with our partner, Plan International. That's where we met Lucia. She entered into a relationship with her much older teacher, and much to her surprise, she got pregnant. Lucia simply did not know a thing about sex. Thereafter, her family forced her to get married before the baby arrived, in their words, to save the situation. In mostly Catholic Timor-Leste, like so many countries, there is a comprehensive sexuality education curriculum. It's seldom taught. Teachers are embarrassed. Some of them actually rip the pages out of the textbook entirely. And without access to education and information, let alone services or supplies, not surprising, is it, that the teen pregnancy rate is so high. So I believe that our programs have to insist on being able to give accurate, timely information that young people are demanding, and that we have to have that dialogue and bridge building with every religion and every culture to be able to reach that goal. In Bangladesh, which is conservative and Islamic, we've heard that there are triumphs that have been recorded in the country, and it's a large youthful population. There we have Generation Breakthrough. It's a project which UNFPA supports to empower young girls and boys. It teaches gender equality, respect for diversity and inclusiveness, and awareness of these patriarchal and religious norms that all too often can impede rights and well-being of women and girls. And this program, Generation Breakthrough, engages religious schools and clerics in imparting teachings, often using Quranic scripture, to reiterate and strengthen lessons in gender equality and rights, and very positive results there. I like the story of 17-year-old Mohammed, who told us how his mom would give him the best piece of fish. And she would say, "You will be taking care of us in our old age. You need this to sharpen your brain." And his little sisters got the leftovers. But today, Mohammed is a Generation Breakthrough feminist man, a member who fights for gender equality, and he advocates that girls can do and be whatever boys can do and be. And it's a message which is reinforced by the local madrasa. This is a human right, the expression of happy, healthy sexuality. And it's an equity issue and a justice issue as governments, as NGOs, as communities, as citizens, as the people affected ourselves, demand that everyone, including persons of diverse sexual orientation, any gender identity, that all of our rights be upheld. Why should certain actions be criminalized and safety denied to anyone? Truly leaving no one behind. That's the principle of inclusivity. And there is no place for stigma and discrimination, especially in healthcare settings. Not when it's based on sex, race, ethnicity, mental health condition, disability, gender identity, HIV status, whatever it is, it's unacceptable. It denies people their right to health. Moreover, at times there is a lack of respect for the rights of health workers themselves, and that affects ability to be able to provide services and can actually be harmful to the health of the health worker. Governments are ultimately accountable for ensuring non-discrimination in healthcare. This region, the Asia Pacific, has some wonderful examples of community empowerment of sex workers, of people who inject drugs, and people of diverse sexual orientation and gender identity. Asta Parivar is one that I know of. It's a sex workers collective in Mumbai, and it brings together community-based organizations to advocate for health and legal rights of sex workers, including anyone living with HIV. And this results in change at the local level that can then be scaled up, replicated nationally and throughout the region. So I like to cite these examples. The Asia Pacific Coalition on Male Sexual Health, APCOM, is another one based in Bangkok. And they're a regional civil society partnership with the United Nations overall, advocates for the rights and well-being of men who have sex with men through the lens of HIV prevention and treatment. These are just a few of the stories of the challenge and the opportunity that demonstrate how laws, social norms, culture, and religion can influence the sexual and reproductive health and rights, equity, and equality of billions of our fellow human beings. Each, to me, is an example of perseverance, of partnership, of sticking together. Sticks in a bundle do not break. When we band together in partnership, we certainly can succeed, and it was great to have examples of that in this panel this afternoon, of people who are not ever going to give up, because the fundamental issue is my body, my rights. Economic inequality does divide people. There are certain countries of haves and have-nots. Inequalities in sexual and reproductive health and rights and gender inequality can divide people into cans and cannots. An adolescent girl who cannot enjoy her sexual and reproductive rights is a girl who cannot stay healthy. She cannot complete her education. She can't find decent work outside the home without support, and she won't be able to chart her own economic future. The State of World Population Report, published last month by UNFPA and entitled Worlds Apart and available online, is path-breaking because it looks at this inequality within countries in terms of sexual and reproductive health and rights and how that can disenfranchise untold millions of women. It also bolsters the social and economic systems that enable a privileged few to float to the top and stay there, while the vast majority fall to the bottom. This type of inequality robs individuals of their rights, and it denies whole nations the foundations for development that a united, equitable society would represent. So when we come back to my original question, what kind of future do we wish for Asia and the Pacific, and what will it take to create it? We heard some examples of solutions earlier, and I would say that knowing that by 2030, when the SDGs will be achieved, hopefully, adolescent girls of today will form a significant proportion of that workforce as leaders, as innovators, as entrepreneurs, as teachers, and much more. Many will also be mothers and caregivers for a new generation and for the parental aging generation. Let's not leave a single one of these girls behind. Let us equip her to craft her own future. Now, my slide. Imagine a girl who is standing at a fork in the road. I'd like to have the slide back. Can you go backwards? And on one path of this fork in the road, can we go in the other direction? Slide number 1 was showing the green path, which was a path of an adolescent girl, and we can decide in which direction she can go. The green path shows school and higher education, gainful employment that is free of sexual harassment, and adolescence where sexuality can be discussed without taboos. Adult marriage, yes. Security of place. Union with a partner of her choice, where her sexuality can be enjoyed, devoid of violence. She can have healthy children if and when she chooses to have them, and the ability to invest resources for the well-being of her children. And this is all part of the cycle of life, leading her to a secure old age, right? That's a good demographic dividend. The other path, hopefully the path not taken, is too often the fate of many people that we know. Child or early marriage, leaving school, a pregnancy that's early or unplanned, unsafe, risky childbirth, violence, abuse, HIV, other STIs, informal employment, none at all, erratic, hostility at home, the possibility of displacement, and no pension, no security in old age. If this girl is disabled or she's a refugee, just multiply the vulnerabilities. So for adolescent girls to take their space in 2030 as an adult woman and to be a formidable force for the good, they need our support. They need our support to overcome income inequalities and discrimination on any front. Why should the world be increasingly unequal? Let's not stop until we change that. To change the balance of power, to create opportunity, to ensure rights, including the right to sexual and reproductive health. When you have young people that are a quarter of the world's population, these young people, you young people, you're connected to each other and to the world around us as never before. Yet young people have needs, and they have dreams, and these dreams cannot wait. Technology, connectivity, instant communication, that can really up our game in terms of communication for change, raising social awareness, and getting to that scale. So I say to you as a young person, never give up. The #MeToo movement is confronting widespread sexual harassment and abuse, spreading around the world, including right here in Asia and the Pacific. And I also say to those women, keep your courage up, persevere, don't give up. It's important to strengthen our ability to tackle these demographic and population issues. This is the noble purpose of public health. When you have a population that's aging, that's a concern for many countries in this region, then we have to recognize that healthy aging has to begin with healthy youth. And healthy youth has to begin with safe, planned pregnancy. My body, my decision, my right. That's the cycle of life. That's the beauty of life, generation following generation. And for myself, my involvement with this region over more than 2 decades brings me here in front of you with a lot of confidence and a lot of excitement for the upcoming 2 years. We're going to have some debates next year at the Conference on Population and Development, looking at CSW and the status of women, and coming up to ICPD plus 25 in 2019, and the Beijing Conference plus 25 in 2020. And I think if we plan together and if we stick together, we're not going to break. We're going to advance this proposition, and so many women are going to benefit from our ability to take courage, not to give up, to raise our voices, to help them raise their own voices. So to you, all the government officials, civil society partners, you're from a faith-based organization, whoever we are, partnering together, we're stronger. The young people who are gathered here today are going to have that spark ignited to understand that they can lead, they can help lead this region to come together. They'll be part of that open, frank, strategic dialogue. I think that working well together, we will be able to cast aside harmful laws, norms, and practices, and we have seen that arc of history so far. The anxiety is to accelerate the progress and move forward and never to move back. Let us persevere to accelerate progress on sexual and reproductive health and rights for all. So together we build a future where 0 is the only acceptable number, 0 deaths in childbirth, 0 unmet need for family planning, and certainly 0 violence and harmful practices against women and girls. And I include child marriage and female genital mutilation in that violence. It will be a world where we fulfill the hopes and dreams for a future that we will create here in the Asia-Pacific region and everywhere, where absolutely no one is left behind. So never give up. Thank you very much.